Welcome back to the channel. Happy 2023. I know this is a little delayed to be saying something like that, but fear not, regardless, happy 2023 to all of my subscribers. This year is going to be a lot of fun. I am super excited to be back and to start producing some great content for you guys this year as we inch ever so closely to 1,000 subscribers. I'm currently at the recording of this video around 820. I really think we can push for it, and I'm really hoping we can because I got a lot of awesome content for you guys planned over the course of this year and beyond. And we're going to kick off the new year with an engine I've been looking to review and showcase to you guys for numerous years. This is an engine that's been in my collection for as long as I can remember, since I was about 12 or 13 years old, and only now I'm finally making a video about it. And it's an engine that really truly doesn't need any kind of introduction. I know I'm not wearing the right color for this engine, but you know, we're talking all things C&J and probably the railroad's most iconic locomotive that they ever had. And quite honestly, this is an engine that doesn't need a heck of a lot of an introduction. This is one of the most iconic and one of the most important passenger trains in American history. We're talking all things Blue Comet. Stick around. So I don't think I'm going to go over the history as much as what I was saying in the beginning of this video, only because I have a very good friend here on YouTube. He goes by the name of Sam's Gauge Trains. I highly recommend you guys check out his video on his review of the MPC Blue Comet set that he acquired not terribly long ago. And that video is great because it's a very nice documentary kind of video explaining the history of this train, and he goes in full detail. So I'm going to leave a link to that video somewhere over here or over here, whichever. But please give that a watch. The terrific video that he put together. But what I'm here to discuss to you guys is why this engine is a little special to me, and also just a little bit of the history that I want to share with you guys as to why I think this is one of the most iconic. So first of all, let's get it out of the room. This is a MTH original 1990s Premier Blue Comet. This engine was, at the time, probably the most detailed model trains you can get. Obviously, there were brass companies and so forth, but to me, this is probably one of the most iconic MTH engines that Mike Wolf ever produced under his name. This was a true one-for-one replica of the C&J P47s. Which was probably their biggest and their flagship locomotive, aside from the Camelbacks and maybe a few other 060 locomotive types. But safe to say this was definitely one of their crown jewel locomotives, and just a really awesome model. But before I talk about the model itself, I want to go over a little bit of the history. So the Blue Comet was introduced around the 1930s, and unfortunately it came out at the worst possible time because it came out and was introduced by the C&J to compete with the likes of the Reading Railroad and some of the other named trains at the time, such as the Pennsylvania Railroad's Broadway Limited and the New York Central's 20th Century Limited. And C&J did not have a lot of traffic to their railroad as far as passenger service. They didn't go far. They were mostly a commuter railroad. However, this was their attempt to bring more interest into the railroad and drive a lot more revenue by bringing people to Atlantic City and all the beaches and so forth, and all the casinos at the time. But what was a big problem with this engine was during the Great Depression, the ticket prices for this engine were very high, and the engine just never got a chance to go further than what the railroad was anticipating. This train was put out of service by, I think, around 1940 or 1941 or so, and that was that. But what makes this engine so iconic is actually the exact opposite of all that. To me, what makes this train so iconic is Joshua Lionel Cowan produced the tinplate version that we all know, the 400E original Blue Comet set. And that was a standard gauge set, and very similar to the real train. At the time, that was a big failure. That almost bankrupted Lionel entirely until Little Mouse came around on a hand car and saved that company to where it is today. But what I think is really iconic and interesting about that is, decades later, that is now single-handedly one of the most iconic toy train sets that you'll ever think of when people talk about this hobby. For somebody who's not really into trains, this is probably that set that everybody acknowledges instantly. They either think of the Blue Comet, or they think of the Santa Fe F3s, or the Hudsons of the time. So safe to say that engine gone down in history for the right reasons. But what also is really cool is the Blue Comet is actually the logo of MTH Trains. which I think is always really interesting to see and get the little history about that and just how it inspired so many people to what we have now. And of course, it's been in pop culture. It's been in The Sopranos. And don't trust me, I'm making sure I'm not going to get whacked tonight being the next Bobby Bacala with this engine. So don't worry about that. I'm safe. Ken Jr., if you're watching this, don't worry. Nobody's going to get shot tonight. I'm not having anybody in your store get attacked. Don't worry. But anyway, let's get into the interesting facts about this specific model. So now let's get into why this engine is so important and significant to me. This engine means the world to me. This is probably my favorite locomotive of all time, and this is probably single-handedly my favorite model that I own in my collection. This is significant to me because this is actually the very first fully scale locomotive that I bought with my own money. And you know, everybody has their stories as far as when they got their first locomotive that they really, really wanted, and they worked hard to get it and saved up for it. And for me, this was that engine. So I actually picked this up at a show several years ago at the Westchester County Toy and Train Fair. That's over in White Plains, New York, a little further upstate for me. But safe to say, that was a really popular show at the time, and I used to go to it all the time. Unfortunately, since COVID, it really hasn't been around anymore, and I used to go at least once a year. But at that show, 13-year-old Matt found this engine, and I had to buy it. And now what's cool about this is, obviously I have the original box, but this is a very special box to me because this was the price I paid for this engine. I always tell people and they never believe me. So I'm gonna zoom in here for you a little bit. Paid $400 for this engine. I kept the tag for that reason because if you go on eBay, these engines fetch way more than that for a single Proto 1 engine. Given its collectability, this engine usually still goes for around $800 to $900 on eBay. So for me at the time to get an engine like this, like a holy grail engine, and to get it for that price, it's always the most special thing ever. And it was a memory I will remember for the rest of my model railroading days, and it's a very special locomotive to me, and it's still to this day my favorite locomotive that I own. And I love everything about the history of this train. I love how it looks, I love how it sounds. Just so much rich history about this train and its significance to railroading and model railroading as well. But now let's get into probably the most exciting feature and aspect about this model. So years have gone by. This engine has sat in my collection for a long time. I would run it here at my local club, the Nassau Lionel Operating Engineers. I would run it here for open houses, and I would always have fun with it. But I kept seeing videos for years of the Proto 2 and the later Proto 3 versions of this engine, and I always wanted this engine to be Command. But I never wanted to get rid of this and try to just go out and buy the newer one. I really wanted to keep this engine because of its significance to me. And this engine was in limbo, quite honestly, for a long time. And it wasn't until a couple years ago that a very good friend, and now one of my closest friends in this hobby, Sid of Sid's Trains, him and I connected a couple years ago, and now, as you guys know, he does a phenomenal business of doing legacy control upgrades. He will take a lot of different locomotives from different brands or Lionel engines and will fully upgrade them to pretty much the current modern specs and boards and sounds that you would expect from the newest Lionel engines that come out today. And so what we have here is the MTH engine, but it's now been fully upgraded to Lionel Legacy. So I want to get into a little bit of the stats as to what Sid did for this engine. So first of all, as far as the upgrade process of this, I do want to take note that Lionel did have a legacy version of this engine, and it's a great model. I have a couple of friends that have the legacy version that came out around 2010 or 2011, and it's a good model in its own right. But for me, Lionel never really captured the proper appearance of the Blue Comet. So for me, this is really cool. I get the best of both worlds here, having the MTH, properly proportioned and detailed model to the C&J, but I get Lionel sounds, because Lionel sounds have been awesome. Now, granted, I do lose the PS2 or PS3 station sounds and the PFAs and all the other fun stuff that comes with those engines. But to be honest, this engine just really sounds awesome. Plus, this also has whistle steam. So basically what Sid was able to do was he gutted out all the MTH electronics that did reside in this engine at the time, and he was fully able to change it out to a whole bunch of stuff that I wanted on this engine. So he first got the sound card that came off of the original Legacy Blue Comet set, and we were able to put it into this. He was able to do a brand new smoke unit, which is awesome because the MTH, originally the Proto 1 version, it did have a smoke unit, but it was fan driven, but it wouldn't be synchronized. It would just continuously plume out and puff out the smoke. It would not do what the Legacy ones do or the MTH ones do, where they go per revolution, per chuff. So having that in there is always great. Like I said before, it has the whistle steam. Now, it's really cool to note that I'm going to mention, and I'll have up on screen here, when the engine is moving and giving the whistle placement of this, you will see that when the engine's moving, it will actually shoot out on an angle, which to me is probably really, really exciting and kind of cool, because the newer MTH engines that have their whistle steam, the whistle is built into the actual whistle piece, and you would see it actually shoot out on an angle like a real locomotive. So Sid was able to actually kind of mimic that, and the way that the position of the whistle is on this, when you blow it, it will come out and it will actually, in motion, shoot out on an angle, which is really awesome. I love it. Another thing we did was full LED upgrades to this engine, and we also changed the color of the marker lights on this. So the original MTH marker lights were this bright red color that, at least to me, is incorrect. I really like the green that pops off of the nickel trimmed markers up front, and I just think that that's a really great look, and just the colors blend so nicely together. So having that there was great. A full LED headlight, a brand new flickering firebox glow, as well as a cab interior light, and also a reverse light on there, and all the standard Legacy features and sounds that you would come to expect. So to me, that was also a really huge plus. So Sid, thank you so much for your amazing work that you put together for this engine. It's the engine I've always wanted. I've already had this engine, but now I can safely say that this is an engine I'm going to be running for years and years to come with so much enjoyment, and I just can't wait to showcase to you guys this running. So without further ado, let's run this guy, and I'll see you guys in a minute. So what did you guys think? I gotta tell you guys, this is just a awesome engine that Sid threw together, and I'm so happy to finally have this back in the collection, better than ever, as they say. Sid, you did a phenomenal job once again. This engine runs great, sounds great. You'll be seeing this a lot more in future videos and running session videos. But that being said, guys, I'm going to wrap it up here. Stay tuned. I have, like I said, a whole bunch of other exciting videos planned for you guys. I actually have another video that's going to be coming out not too much longer after this video drops, because we have another really exciting custom that has been in the works for literally a year and a half, almost 2 years in the making. And that's a video that was done by another special friend of mine that I cannot wait to showcase his work for you guys really soon. That being said, I'm Matty C. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.